The night my daughter showed up bleeding on my porch, my name was already on a loan I never signed. People think the worst kind of violence comes from a fist. They're wrong. Sometimes it comes from a ballpoint pen and a lie told in a calm, reasonable voice. My daughter once told me, "Mum, Eric says he's grateful you helped us with the down payment. He says he'll always look out for you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that all the nights I spent at the dispatch console, all the holidays I worked so she could have gifts under the tree, had led her to a safe home and a good man. But gratitude has a way of evaporating, not all at once, just little pieces at a time. Until one day you're standing in your own kitchen, staring at your own shaky signature on a contract you don't remember seeing, and realizing somebody has been planning to take everything you worked for. The bruises on my daughter's body were fresh. The bruises on my name had been forming for weeks. I just hadn't seen them yet. My name is Donna Carver. I'm 68 years old. I worked almost 30 years as a police dispatcher in a small Midwestern town where everybody thinks they know everybody's business. And this is the night I learned that people don't just try to steal your money when you're older. They try to steal your mind, your story, and the right to sign your own name. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe to Her Legacy Tales, where every story reminds us that strength doesn't retire. Now, back to the beginning. I was already half asleep when the knocking started. I'd turned off the TV, or at least I thought I had. The last thing I remembered was some late-night rerun humming in the background while I dozed in my old brown recliner. My knees ached from a cold front pushing through town. My shoulder throbbed with that familiar dull pain that never quite went away after years of leaning over radios and maps. Being a dispatcher doesn't sound hard until you've done it for 3 decades. You don't leave with scars on your skin. You leave with them on your nerves. At first, I thought the noise was part of a dream. A door slamming in some show. A car backfiring. But then it came again. Bang. 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 3 hard hits against wood. A pause. Then a weaker, dragging knock, like whoever was out there was running out of strength. My eyes flew open. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then the familiar shapes of my living room settled around me in the dim glow from the street lamp outside. The framed pictures on the wall, the throw blanket folded over the back of the couch, the old clock ticking too loudly on the far side. The knocking came again, rattling the glass in the small window by the door. I checked the time out of habit. The clock on the wall glowed 1:06 in the morning. Nothing good ever knocks at your door after midnight. That was one of the first things the old sergeant told me when I started at the dispatch center. I used to think he meant officers, bringing bad news to families. That night, I learned it can go the other way too. I pushed the recliner down and forced my legs to move. They protested the sudden work. Stiff, tired, 68 years old like the rest of me. But training is a stubborn thing. My body moved even while my mind felt foggy. As I crossed the room, I listened. Old habits die last. I heard the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the distant hiss of a truck on the highway, the scrape of brittle leaves on the sidewalk outside. And under all of that, right up against my front door, I heard something else. Breathing. Fast. Ragged. Almost like sobbing, held in through clenched teeth. "Who is it?" I called, staying a few feet back from the door. I didn't flip on the porch light yet, just the small lamp in the entryway. Enough for me to see shapes through the frosted glass. Not enough for whoever was out there to see me clearly. There was a pause, the kind that stretches time. Then a voice I knew better than my own spoke, raw and shaking. "Mum? Please. It's me. It's Melissa. Open the door." My hand hit the deadbolt before my brain caught up. The lock slid back with a heavy thunk. I fumbled at the chain I rarely used these days, my fingers suddenly thick and clumsy, and yanked the door open. My daughter fell into me. I'd seen Melissa exhausted before. I'd seen her sick, heartbroken, furious as a teenager. But I had never seen her body give up like that. She folded against my chest, knees buckling, arms clutching at my shoulders the way she did when she was 5 and afraid of thunderstorms. Easy, I breathed, wrapping both arms around her. I've got you. You're okay. You're home. She didn't answer. She just trembled. The porch light spilled across her face. I wish I could tell you I handled it like the seasoned professional I once was. I wish I could say my dispatcher brain kicked in first, cataloguing injuries calmly, checking for airway, breathing, circulation. But for a few seconds, I was only her mother. Her lower lip was split open, raw red beneath drying blood. The left side of her face had swollen so badly I could barely see her eye. Her cheekbone was purple, the kind of deep, blooming purple you don't get from bumping into a cabinet door. Faint, shadowy ovals along her jaw looked like fingerprints that had sunk into her skin. Her hair, usually neat from a long day at the dental office, was wild, stuck to her forehead with sweat. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. She was clutching her ribcage with both hands. Not casually. Not the way you do if you've just taken a bruise. This was protective. Desperate. Like every breath was a negotiation with pain. "Melissa," I said, and my voice broke on the second syllable. "Who did this?" We both knew. I asked anyway. She tried to straighten up and failed. Don't call anyone," she whispered. "Please, Mum. Promise me you won't call the police." I guided her inside, using my body as a brace. The old floorboards creaked under our combined weight. She stumbled once, biting back a cry, and I felt the tremor run through her. "You need a doctor," I said. "That's not up for debate." "I can't go to the hospital," she gasped as I lowered her onto the couch. "If they put it in a report, he'll know. He checks everything. He knows people. He'll say I made it up. He'll say I'm crazy. He said if I open my mouth, he'll take everything from me. From you." Her fingers dug into the cushion. Her eyes, well, the one that could still open, darted toward the door like she expected it to explode inward any second. "Eric did this," I said. It wasn't a question. She closed her eyes. 2 tears slid out from under the swollen lid. "He kicked me," she whispered. "He grabbed my arm first because I wouldn't sign. And then he said I was ungrateful, that I was trying to ruin his plans, that I was letting you poison me against him. He said you were crazy, that everyone knows it. And then he—" The rest dissolved into sobs. That was the moment I felt it. Not anger. Anger I could have handled. This was colder. Harder. It was the same feeling I used to get at the console when a call came in whispering, "He said if I tell anyone, he'll kill me." I'd feel something click into place behind my ribs. A switch flipping from off-duty to, "We're doing this now." I didn't argue with Melissa about the police. Not yet. That fight would come later, and it would have to be on her terms. But a doctor, that I could push. "I'm calling Marisol," I said, already moving toward the kitchen. "We'll go in quiet. No sirens. No report she can't control. Just help." "Mum?" Her voice followed me down the short hall, small and scared, and it almost broke me. Almost. I grabbed my cell from the counter and scrolled to the contact list I hardly touched anymore. Retirement had shrunk my world down to neighbours, church friends, and the pharmacy. But some names you keep, just in case. Marisol Kent answered on the second ring. "Donna?" she mumbled. You okay? No, I said. And neither is Melissa. She's here. She's hurt. Bad. The sleep slid out of her voice like someone flipped a switch. What kind of hurt? Face. Lip split. One eye nearly shut. She's hugging her ribs like they might fall out if she lets go. Breathing's fast but steady. She's scared out of her mind. Did he do it? She didn't say a name. She didn't have to. Yes, I said. My throat burned around the word. All right, Marisol said, all nurse now. Bring her to the ER side door. Don't go through the main entrance. Text me when you pull up. I'll meet you with a wheelchair. We'll code it as abdominal pain if she's not ready to talk. No cops, unless you ask. You know the drill. I do, I said quietly. Thank you. When I came back into the living room, Melissa's phone was buzzing on the coffee table. Eric flashed across the screen. It buzzed again. A text popped up in the preview bar before the screen dimmed. Where are you? Answer me. Another buzz. Another text. If you're at your crazy mother's, tell her this. If either of you says one word to anybody, I'll make sure you lose everything. I've already started. You have no idea. I stared at the words until my own reflection blurred in the glass. Then I did what I would have told any caller to do. I took a picture, then another. Evidence. Times. Dates. Don't read those, Melissa whispered, watching me with one good eye. Please, Mom, don't make him madder. Honey, I said softly, slipping the phone into my pocket. I don't think it's possible to make a man like that madder. I think he lives there. Getting her to the car felt like lifting concrete. Every step off the porch was a slow dance between her pain and my age. I kept one arm around her waist, the other bracing her elbow, talking nonsense the whole way. Not comforting words, just steady sound. You're doing fine. One more step. Watch the edge there. I've got you. Almost there. As we shuffled down, a light flicked on across the street. Ruth Harper stepped onto her porch in a faded pink robe and slippers, hair sticking up in every direction. She squinted at us through the morning dark. Donna? She called, voice low. Everything all right? For years, I'd answered that question with automatic politeness. Fine, Ruth. Just a late-night snack. Fine, Ruth. Just couldn't sleep. Not this time. No, I said, honest and bare. It's not. She took a few steps closer, hand shading her eyes. When she saw Melissa's face in the spill of my porch light, her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, sweet Lord, she whispered. Is that? Yes, I said. And Ruth? That fancy doorbell camera of yours? She blinked, following my gaze to the little black lens mounted near her front door. The tiny red light glowed like a watching eye. It records everything, she said slowly. My grandson set it up, motion and all. Make sure it keeps whatever it just saw, will you? I asked. If this ever goes to court, I may need to show somebody exactly how my daughter arrived at my house tonight. Ruth straightened a bit, like someone had just given her a job in a play. You'll have it, she said. And Donna? Yes? You get him, she said, voice trembling. However you have to. We've all seen him swaggering around like he owns this street. Somebody needs to remind him he doesn't. I intend to, I said. The drive to the hospital felt both too long and too short. The streets were mostly empty, the traffic lights cycling pointlessly through red and green for nobody. Melissa leaned her head back against the seat, eyes closed. Every bump in the road made a soft sound escape her throat. Somewhere between our block and the highway, she whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to bother you. I know you're tired. I couldn't go anywhere else. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. You come to me at 3 in the morning, at noon, in the middle of a tornado, and it is not a bother, I said. You hear me? You're my daughter. That doesn't retire. She didn't answer, but her hand slid across the console, searching for mine. I let go of the wheel long enough to squeeze it. In the harsh parking lot lights, the bruises on her face looked worse. Marisol met us by the side door, a wheelchair already waiting, her scrubs half covered by a grey hoodie. She didn't say hello. She didn't have to. Hey there, Melissa, she murmured instead, her voice going soft in the way good nurses have. Rough night, huh? We're going to help you. You're safe here. Inside, the world narrowed to curtain tracks, beeping monitors, and fluorescent light. They cut her shirt away to see the full pattern of damage. Marisol and the attending doctor traded quiet words over her body. Contusions. No obvious deformity. Guarding on palpation. Check for hairline fractures. I stood at the head of the bed, one hand on the rail, watching their hands, not their eyes. I didn't need pity. I just needed them to be thorough. When they wheeled her off for scans, Marisol squeezed my shoulder. Go sit down, Donna, she said gently. If you fall over from not eating, I'm going to have to admit you too. I managed a cracked smile and wandered out to the waiting area. The chairs were as uncomfortable as they'd been the last time I'd sat there, years earlier for my late husband. Same dull artwork on the walls. Same stale coffee smell. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number this time. I knew who it was. I let it ring out. A text followed. You think you're clever, taking her to your little nurse friend. You're both crazy. They'll see that soon enough. None of this will stick. Paper is on my side. Paper is on my side. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I'd spent nearly 30 years listening to officers shout for backup while I pulled addresses, warrants, and priors out of thin air. I knew what paper could do. I knew how it could be twisted. I also knew how to untwist it. When we finally got home, dawn was starting to grey the sky. I got Melissa into her old bedroom, helped her into one of my oversized flannel nightgowns, and tucked a blanket around her, careful not to touch the worst of the bruises. Don't leave, she murmured, catching my wrist. I'm just going to the kitchen, I said. I'll be right back, I promise. She let go, drifting off almost mid-breath. In the quiet of the kitchen, the house felt different. Not haunted, exactly. Just fragile. Like a place where something important had cracked, even if the walls were still standing. I went to the cupboard over the fridge and pulled down a blue file folder held together with an old rubber band. House. Paid in full. I'd labelled it myself the year I burned the mortgage with Harold in the backyard grill. We'd toasted marshmallows over it afterward, laughing like two kids. I flipped the folder open. Tax receipts. The satisfaction letter from the bank. Insurance papers. I knew every sheet in there. I'd looked at them every January with a small private pride. There, tucked neatly on top where it didn't belong, was something new. A white envelope from a bank I'd never used. My name printed in bold letters across the front. I frowned and slid it out. Welcome to your new home equity line of credit, it said cheerfully in blue ink. My heart thudded once, hard. I turned the page. My eyes ran past the sales language, the terms, the interest rate, until they landed on a line near the bottom. Signature of borrower, Donna L. Carver. The letters looked like mine. Same loops, same lean. But there was something off. People who sign their names for 68 years know that feeling. Underneath, in smaller print, was another line. Successor borrower, in case of incompetence. Melissa Vaughan. For a long moment, all I could hear was the clock in the living room ticking. Eric's text flashed through my mind. I've already started. I sat down slowly. The chair felt farther away than it should have. My fingers didn't feel old when they lifted my phone. They felt steady. I took a picture of that signature. Then one of the whole page. Then one of the envelope with today's date circled from the calendar on the wall. Up the hall, the floor creaked softly as Melissa shifted in bed. The house settled around us, the way old houses do. He thought he had paper on his side. He thought I wouldn't notice a loan I hadn't asked for. He thought bruises and fear would keep my daughter quiet, and age would keep me confused. Sitting at that kitchen table, the dawn light creeping across the form with my stolen name on it, I felt that cold, hard click in my chest again. The same one I used to feel when an officer's voice came over the radio tight and scared, saying, "Dispatch, I need you with me on this one." "I'm with you," I whispered, though nobody else was in the room. Maybe I was talking to Melissa. Maybe I was talking to every woman who'd ever been told she was crazy when she started asking questions. Either way, I knew one thing. This wasn't just about bruises anymore. This was about a man who thought he could erase my signature, my house, my mind, and get away with it. He wanted a quiet victim. He got me instead. I didn't sleep that morning. I lay in bed for an hour, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow, as if it too was trying to stay quiet. Every time the house settled, every small creak, every shifting board, my heart jumped. I kept imagining Eric's truck coming down the street, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder, his heavy boots on the porch, his fists on my door. I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid he'd find Melissa before she had even taken one full breath without him in the room. Around 7:30, I heard a soft moan from down the hall. Not fear, just pain. I pushed myself out of bed, the stiffness in my knees screaming at me as if reminding me that I didn't bounce like I used to. When I reached her doorway, she was awake, curled on her side, clutching her ribs. "Mum," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Are we safe here?" The question hit harder than anything she could have said. That my home, her childhood home, had become a place she had to ask about, like a stranger pressing a doorbell. "We're safe," I said gently. "You're safe. Nobody is getting anywhere near you." I sat beside her and touched her hair lightly. She flinched. Not from me, from a memory wearing someone else's face. "I made soup," I said. "It's probably too hot because I forgot how new my stove is, but it's waiting for you." She tried to smile. It came out more like a grimace. "You always make soup." "That's because soup fixes things." "Not this," she whispered. I didn't disagree. Some wounds don't heal with broth and herbs. But I couldn't tell her that. Not now. "Let me help you up." She shook her head, eyes squeezed shut. "I can do it." She tried. She couldn't. Her body betrayed her halfway to sitting, and I caught her under the arms before she slid back down. "Just this once. Let me be the mum," I said softly. She nodded, too tired to pretend otherwise. In the kitchen, she barely touched the spoon. She winced every time the metal clinked against the bowl. The bruise across her ribs made breathing shallow. Her lips were so swollen she could barely sip water without spilling. When she finally gave up, her head dipped forward, arms wrapped around her stomach. "Mum," she whispered, "we need to talk." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. The blue file folder was still on the table, the loan contract peeking out beneath a credit card bill and a calendar from last year. Melissa stared at it like it was a dying animal. "I didn't know," she said, voice trembling. I swear I didn't know what he was doing. He said you asked him to help you with your paperwork. He said you didn't want to bother me. Melissa, I said quietly, do you remember me ever asking Eric to help me with anything? She swallowed, throat thick. No. Do you remember me mentioning refinancing? Or repairs? Or loans? No. Do you remember me asking you to sign anything on my behalf? Her breath caught. He said you were getting confused. My chest tightened. She kept going, the words spilling now, like she'd been holding them back for months. Mom, he kept telling me little things. That you repeated yourself sometimes. That you put your keys in the fridge one day. That you forgot your PIN number at the ATM. That you looked overwhelmed when he brought you insurance forms. He said it embarrassed you. That you didn't want to admit you needed help. I stared at her. I've never put my keys in the fridge, I said. And I know my PIN better than my birthday. She nodded miserably. I know, but he made everything sound so reasonable, like he was just trying to take care of you. And I thought maybe I was being overprotective. He kept telling me I worry too much. And then you started worrying about the wrong thing, I said softly. She nodded. He slipped papers under other papers, she whispered. I think he did it more than once. He always timed it when I was tired or when we were running late. He'd say, just sign here, babe. It's just the routine annual stuff. And I'd sign the top page without looking because I thought, he's my husband. I leaned back, slowly, letting the words settle like dust. I wasn't angry at her. I was furious at him. Manipulators don't shout. They whisper. They isolate. They plant seeds long before the harvest. Mum? She whispered suddenly, voice cracking. I think he's been planning something. For months, maybe more. He kept talking about guardianship. I didn't move. What exactly did he say? That it's not safe for you to handle things alone. That you could be taken advantage of. That the bank told him you asked the same question twice. That maybe it would be best if someone helped make decisions for you before anything serious happened. My blood went cold. Melissa, I said slowly, did you tell anyone I was having memory problems? No, she said, eyes wide. Never. He said he was handling it. That it was better coming from him so it didn't stress you out. Stress me out. That man had no idea what stress looked like. I'd handled more emergencies in 30 years than he'd handled honest emotions. I took a slow breath, forcing myself calm. Melissa, I said, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to be very honest. She nodded. Has he ever talked to your doctor? Or mine? She hesitated, a flicker, almost nothing, but I'd spent decades reading hesitation over crackling radios. He took you to urgent care that one time, she whispered, when you fell in the parking lot. He insisted. He didn't want me there. He said he didn't want me to fuss over you. I remembered that day. I remembered the fall. But I also remembered something else. The doctor asking if I had been forgetful lately. And Eric answering before I could speak. He said you mixed up your medications once, Melissa whispered, staring into her lap. He said the nurse wrote it down. My stomach twisted. I had never mixed up my medications in my life. I opened the file folder again and slid the home equity contract toward her. Melissa, I said gently, look at this. She did. Her breath shuddered. Mum, that's your signature. No, I said quietly. It's not. It looks like mine because it was traced, or copied, or lifted from something else. But I never sat in a bank and signed this. She covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God. she whispered. Mom, he forged your name. He forged something, I said, and he didn't stop there. I placed the envelope next to the loan. See this line? Successor borrower in case of incompetence. That's not a normal clause. That's something someone adds when they want control. She blinked, stunned. Colour drained from her bruised face. Mom. Yes. He wants to declare you incompetent. I think he wants to try. Her breath turned shallow, panicked. No, she whispered. No, Mom, no. He wouldn't go that far. He wouldn't. He went far enough to put his boot into your ribs, I said quietly. What makes you think he'd stop short of a courtroom? She buried her face in her hands and cried silently. I let her. Sometimes silence is kinder than words. When she finally lifted her head, eyes swollen with tears, she looked like a child again. Not broken, just lost. What do we do? She whispered. We start with the truth, I said. Just like in dispatch. No panic, no assumptions. Facts, evidence, timeline. You make it sound easy. It's not, I said, but it's clear. I went into my bedroom and returned with the old scanner printer, a clunky machine with a strip of duct tape across the lid. My back protested when I carried it to the table. Getting old is many things, but subtle isn't one of them. I plugged it in. The light flickered to life. Melissa watched me through swollen eyes. You're scanning it. I'm scanning everything, I said. This house has never heard the word incompetence without laughing. She almost smiled. Almost. I scanned the loan document, the envelope, my signature from my driver's license for comparison, my signature from last year's tax return, the home insurance renewal, a birthday card from Melissa with my name in my handwriting on the check I'd written her. Then I texted one name, Patrick. He was an elder law attorney I'd known from my dispatch years. I sent him a single picture, the loan contract, and the words, call me, urgent, fraud involved, safety concern. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Donna? His voice was still waking up. Please tell me this is a bad joke. I wish it were, I said. Is this your signature? No. And the loan? You didn't approve this? I didn't even know it existed until this morning. He exhaled sharply. I heard rustling, papers shifting. Donna, this is serious. Very serious. A home equity line of credit with forged authorization is criminal fraud. And that clause about incompetence? That's a red flag on top of a red flag. I know. I paused. And Patrick. Melissa is hurt. I didn't say abused. I didn't have to. The silence on his end told me he understood immediately. Is she safe? He asked. Yes, for now. Then listen closely. I need you to gather everything. Every paper in your house that has your signature on it. Every medical note from the urgent care visit. Every message he's sent you or her. Put it all in one place. And Donna? Don't confront him. Not yet. Let me build the ground before you shake it. I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me. I understand. And Donna? He added, voice low. I'm proud of you for catching this. Most people don't see it until it's too late. When the call ended, Melissa was staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. He knows? She whispered. He knows, I said. Now we build. For the next hour, she sat wrapped in a blanket while I moved through the house like a woman possessed, pulling file folders from the hall closet, boxes from under the bed, old receipts from dresser drawers. I wasn't frantic. I was thorough. Dispatch training teaches you that clarity saves lives. I applied that now. Birth certificate, mortgage satisfaction letter, utility statements, my Medicare paperwork, the urgent care discharge sheet from the day I fell. When I found it, something made my stomach twist. A small box checked in the corner. Patient shows mild cognitive confusion, per family report. Family report. Eric. Melissa saw my face and winced. Mum? I'm sorry. I didn't know he said that. I didn't know he told them anything. You're not responsible for his mouth, I said firmly. While she rested, I gathered my old notebooks, the ones from dispatch days when I kept lists for myself. License plates, codes, reminders, protocols. I flipped through them and found pages filled with neat handwriting, proof I hadn't lost the clarity people my age are so easily accused of losing. Every detail I found went into the blue folder. I printed copies. I labelled envelopes. While I worked, I became aware of quiet weeping. Melissa had curled herself into the corner of the couch, blanket pulled up, shoulders shaking. I sat beside her and waited, not touching her yet, just waiting. After a while, she whispered, I'm so ashamed. I turned toward her. Melissa, you have nothing to be ashamed of. I let him do this, she said, hands covering her bruised eyes. I let him get into my head. I let him get into your life. He made me think I was protecting you when really, he was using me. You trusted your husband, I said softly. That's not a crime. But what he did is. She looked at me then, eyes rimmed red, face swollen and discoloured. Mum, she whispered. I'm scared he'll take everything you have. I reached out and took her hand. I won't let him, I said simply. There's a kind of strength older women carry that younger ones don't always see yet. It's not loud. It's not aggressive. It's something steadier, forged from years of swallowing worries, getting back up after losses, learning how to live with grief without letting it win. I felt that strength now, rising up like old muscle memory. We're going to fight him, I said. But we're going to do it the right way, on paper, with truth, with evidence, and with people who know how to stop men like him. She sniffed, wiping her face with the sleeve of the blanket. Who? Patrick, I said. Ruth, Marisol, Officer Lane, if we need him, and me. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she whispered, I'm sorry. You're forgiven, I said. Now rest. Melissa fell asleep mid-breath, her face softened by exhaustion. I watched her for a long time. She looked younger when she slept, almost like the little girl who used to tiptoe into my room in the middle of storms. When I was sure she was resting, I slipped outside onto the porch. The morning sun had burned off the last of the cold haze. Birds chirped like the world wasn't cracking open. Across the street, Ruth stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching me. She walked over with a briskness that belied her age. I checked the footage, she announced. It caught everything. Him dropping her off, her on the ground, her knocking, you answering. My throat tightened. Thank you, Ruth. She reached out and touched my arm. Donna, she said quietly, don't let that man turn the town against you. People around here talk before they think, but some of us see exactly what's going on. Her voice softened, and some of us are ready to help. I nodded once. Good, I said, because this isn't just going to be about bruises. No, she said. I figured. Men like him don't just hit, they take, they twist, they plot. Yes, I whispered. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Donna, whatever he started, finish it first. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When she walked back across the street, I remained on my porch, letting the breeze wash over me. Inside, my daughter slept. On my table, the forged loan waited. In my chest, something old and steady settled into place. I had spent decades helping strangers find help in the worst moments of their lives. But now the emergency was mine. And this time, I wasn't answering for anyone else. I was answering for my daughter, for my house, for my name, for myself. I didn't plan to involve anyone else that day. I thought I could gather the facts quietly, build my evidence, protect Melissa, and keep the whole thing contained until we had a clear strategy. But life, especially life after 60, rarely bends to our plans. By mid-morning, after I'd taken Melissa her medication and coaxed her into a shallow nap, I found myself staring at the blue folder on the kitchen table with a feeling I hadn't felt since the worst nights in dispatch. Not fear, something heavier. The sense that a storm had already begun and that pretending it wasn't raining wasn't going to keep us dry. I sat down, opened the folder, and flipped through the papers again, trying to make sense of the timeline. That forged loan was dated 6 weeks ago. The urgent care note with the confusion box checked was from 1 month ago. Melissa's stories about him bringing paperwork and asking for signatures went back at least that far, probably further. It wasn't one bad week or one angry outburst. It was a slow strategy, a steady drip of lies dressed as concerns, planted in rooms I wasn't even in. It was the kind of manipulation that doesn't announce itself. It waits. It watches. It builds a file before you even realize you're the subject. By 10 in the morning, I felt the weight of it pressing on my chest. I knew what came next. I needed the law, not the dramatic kind from television, the quiet kind that lives in the corners of county offices, the procedural kind, the kind that shows up before the police ever do. I called Patrick back and told him I was ready to come in. He told me to bring everything I had, and I hung up before I could change my mind. Melissa was awake by then, sitting in the living room with a blanket pulled around her shoulders like armor. When I told her I had to step out for a couple of hours, she clutched the blanket with white knuckles, panic rising instantly. "What if he comes here?" she whispered, eyes darting toward the window. "He won't," I said softly. "I'm having Officer Lane swing by. He'll keep an eye on the house from the street. And Ruth is across the road, watching like a hawk. You won't be alone." She exhaled shakily, nodded once, and looked down at her feet. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I feel like a child again." I reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Being scared doesn't make you a child," I said gently. "It makes you human, and it makes what he did a crime." She swallowed hard, and I kissed her forehead before stepping out. The drive to Patrick's office felt surreal. The town looked the same as it always had. The bakery with its chalkboard sign out front, advertising cinnamon rolls. The gas station where teenagers hung around pretending not to smoke. The old courthouse clock that never quite kept accurate time. People driving beside me had no idea that the woman in the blue sedan was headed to ask whether someone was trying to steal her identity and her home. They had no idea that my daughter had slept in her childhood bed with bruises she didn't give herself. Emergencies hide in plain sight. That's something dispatch teaches you early. Patrick's office was in an old converted school building on the east side of town. When I got there, he met me at the door, tie crooked, hair still damp from a rushed morning shower. He ushered me into a small conference room, lined with dusty legal books and a table scarred from years of nervous hands tapping on it. I spread the contents of the blue folder across the table. The loan document, the urgent care note, copies of my actual signatures, photographs of Melissa's injuries, screenshots of Eric's threatening messages, the time-stamped video clip Ruth had sent me. Patrick didn't speak for a while. He just examined everything, his brow furrowing deeper by the minute. When he finally looked up, his voice had a tight, controlled edge. Donna, this isn't small, and it isn't random. This is what financial predators do. They gather supportive documents that make an elderly person appear confused or irresponsible. They file paperwork quietly. They get banks to believe a narrative before the victim ever realizes something is off. And when the victim finally pushes back, they're already facing a stack of evidence claiming they can't be trusted. I felt my spine stiffen. I'm not incompetent, I said quietly. I know, he replied. And that's exactly why he wants to say you are. He asked me a dozen questions about the day at urgent care, about Melissa's marriage timeline, about whether anyone else had access to my mail, about my credit history, about the signatures. Then he pulled out a notepad and started sketching a timeline that made my stomach twist as it filled in. Eric bringing paperwork for insurance, the supposedly confused moment at the ATM, the day he insisted on driving me to urgent care, the loan application being filed shortly after, the sudden increase in his talk about helping with decisions. Patterns don't lie. The people who create them do. After an hour, Patrick leaned back and steepled his fingers. Donna, he said slowly, I need to tell you something, and I don't want it to scare you. It's just the truth. I braced myself. If he's gone this far, he continued, there's a real chance he's preparing to petition the court to declare you unable to manage your own affairs. The room went quiet. I felt the air shift. He'd need signatures, I said, my voice shaking. He'd need evidence. Patrick nodded. Yes, and he's collecting both. Your daughter's coerced signature? That urgent care note? The loan he framed as your mistake? That could all be used to build a case. And if he gets that guardianship, temporary or permanent, he could gain control of your house, your bank, accounts, your decisions, everything. My hands tightened into fists. I felt 68 years old, yes, but I also felt every ounce of the strength those years had given me. He won't get it, I said. Patrick gave a faint smile. Not if we stay ahead of him. But you need to understand, he isn't working alone. Someone at the bank helped push this paperwork through too quickly. Someone at urgent care wrote down his words without verifying them. And if he has a lawyer advising him, then you're dealing with more than a reckless man. You're dealing with someone who thinks he's clever. I leaned forward. Then let's be cleverer. Patrick outlined the plan. First, we needed to file a formal fraud alert with all 3 major credit bureaus. Next, we had to freeze my credit to prevent any new accounts from being opened. Then, we'd contact the bank and request all paperwork tied to the loan, every page, every signature, every employee ID involved. On top of that, Patrick wanted me to gather every document that proved my mental clarity, appointment logs, medication records, community involvement, anything that painted a picture of a woman who made decisions with a clear mind. Judges don't want assumptions, Patrick said. They want documentation, so that's what we'll give them. Before I left his office, I asked a question I hadn't planned. Patrick, I said quietly, why do men like him go after women like me? He looked at me for a long second before answering. Because you're the kind of woman who's held a family together her entire life, and people like him mistake that quiet strength for weakness. I didn't expect the tears that burned the backs of my eyes. I blinked them away, nodded, and gathered my folder. When I reached the door, Patrick added, Donna, be careful. If he realizes you're onto him, he may escalate. I didn't tell him I already knew that. When I got home, Melissa was awake but pale, sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up and her arms wrapped around them. The house looked different somehow, like it was holding its breath. She looked up when I walked in. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Did it go okay?" I sat beside her and told her everything Patrick had said, everything we were going to do, everything we needed to gather. She listened like a student in class, absorbing every word even through the fog of painkillers and grief. When I finished, she put a trembling hand over her mouth. "Mum," she whispered, "we're in a lot deeper than I thought." I nodded. "Yes, but we're not drowning. There's a difference." She leaned against me carefully, avoiding the bruised side of her face. "I didn't know," she repeated, voice small. "I truly didn't know what he was planning with your house. I thought he just wanted to fix things. I thought he wanted to help." I stroked her hair gently. When someone wants to help, they don't make you feel afraid. They don't keep secrets. And they don't hurt you. She pressed her forehead to my shoulder and cried quietly. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling her ribs tremble beneath my palm. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I didn't need to open it to know who it was. Melissa stiffened beside me. "Mom?" she whispered. "Please don't answer." I didn't. Instead, I turned the phone face down on the coffee table. Ignorance wasn't safety. Silence was. For now. That afternoon, while Melissa slept, I began making calls. I contacted the bank and requested complete copies of every document associated with the home equity line. The manager hesitated, too much, in my opinion, but eventually agreed to prepare them for pickup. Then I called the urgent care centre and requested my medical records from the day of my fall. The receptionist stuttered when I said I was requesting them to verify accuracy. Guilt always makes people clumsy. After that, I called Officer Lane. He answered on the second ring. "Ma'am?" he said, sounding both alert and cautious. "Everything okay?" "I need a favor," I said. "Nothing official yet. Just a watch on my street. Eyes open." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. "You got it," he said. "I've got a patrol car near your block. I'll swing by every hour." I thanked him. Then I called Ruth. She came over within minutes, still in her gardening clothes, carrying a thumb drive like it was evidence in a federal case. "I made 3 copies," she said proudly. "One for you, one for your lawyer, and one for my freezer in case anyone tries to steal the first 2. I smiled, despite everything. "Thank you, Ruth." "Don't thank me," she said. "Just make sure that man learns who he's messing with." By the time evening came, the house was filled with a strange calm, the kind that happens after a day of heavy truth. Melissa slept on the couch with a blanket tucked around her. The folder sat on the dining table, thicker now with records, screenshots, and typed notes. And I, despite the ache in my knees and the exhaustion behind my eyes, felt more awake than I had in weeks. The slow drip of fear that had been building quietly in my bones had transformed into something else, something steadier, something like a spine straightening after being bent too long. And that was the moment I realized something important. Eric didn't understand the woman he'd chosen to target. He didn't know who I had been for 30 years. He didn't know that I had walked officers through hostage negotiations, CPR instructions, domestic battles, and midnight crises so dark they still woke me some nights. He didn't know that I had saved strangers with nothing but my voice and a county map taped to a desk. He thought age made me frail. He thought grief made me weak. He thought kindness meant amenable. He thought silence meant naive. He was wrong. The light in my hallway flickered once. Outside, a patrol car rolled silently down the street. And inside, in the quiet of my little kitchen, I opened the blue folder again. Steady hands, clear mind. and began planning the next move. Because this wasn't just about stopping him. It was about teaching him that a quiet woman is only quiet until the truth needs a voice. I didn't expect him to show up that morning. I thought Melissa's silence would keep him confused for at least a day, maybe 2. Abusers don't usually wait long to reclaim control, but I hoped the bruises on her body and the missing calls would make him cautious. I was wrong. At 9:24 a.m., his silver truck rolled to a stop in front of my house like he owned the street. I watched from behind the curtain. He stepped out wearing a pressed shirt, clean jeans, and a smile that never once reached his eyes. He carried pastries. The box was tied with a red ribbon. I almost laughed. Men like him always bring something sweet when they're about to sell something bitter. It's how manipulation works. You don't show your teeth until someone's too ashamed or too tired to run. He walked up the steps and knocked as if this were a Sunday visit. I didn't open the door. He knocked again. Then his voice softened, syrupy, like he practiced it in the mirror. "Ma? You in there?" He had no right to call me that. I stepped into the hallway and spoke through the wood. "Eric, leave." He paused. Manipulators don't like being denied their stage. "I brought breakfast. Thought we could talk. Thought I could check on Mel." "She's safe," I said. He chuckled softly. "Safe from what?" That single sentence made my hand curl into a fist. I heard his thumb tapping on something. His phone, probably. Documenting his visit, crafting his narrative. Pieces to twist later. "Eric," I said, "go home." He didn't leave. Instead, he leaned closer to the door. I could hear the false concern in his breath. "I think you're confused, Donna. Mel was upset last night. You're making assumptions. Let me in so we can straighten this out." Confused. He used the word so easily. As if he believed it. As if he'd spoken it often enough that now it felt true to him. "I'm not confused," I said steadily. "I'm done." There was silence. Then a shift in tone. Colder. Calculating. "So that's how it is?" I didn't answer. Footsteps moved away. Then, through the curtain, I saw him walking toward his truck, shaking his head in theatrical disappointment. A man performing innocence for invisible neighbors. But before he opened the door, he paused. He pulled a manila folder from the passenger seat and tilted it slightly, just enough for me to see the top page, the county court seal, and beneath it, bold letters, "Petition for temporary guardianship, Donna Carver." My mouth went dry. He didn't notice me watching. He tucked the folder back into the truck, slammed the door, and drove off. The street was quiet again, but something inside me wasn't. Guardianship. He was already filing for control, filing for my house, my accounts, my decisions, my life. And Melissa's forced signature would be part of it. I felt something crack open inside me, not fear, but clarity. He wasn't just abusive, he was strategic, calculated. He had built a paper cage around me before he ever expected me to notice. I called Patrick immediately. When I told him what I'd seen, he swore under his breath. "Donna, he's moving fast. Faster than I expected." "What do we do?" I asked. "Beat him there?" An hour later, Melissa and I sat in Patrick's office again. The sunlight slanted across the stacks of legal files like blades. Melissa's face was swollen, but her voice was steady as she recounted every moment of the last months. Patrick typed without looking up. "He'll use that urgent care report, the loan, the supposed confusion. He'll claim you're vulnerable and he's stepping in. And he'll use Melissa to validate it." Melissa trembled. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know what I was signing." Patrick stopped typing. He looked at her carefully. Melissa, listen to me. People under coercion are not responsible for the crimes committed with their signatures. Do you understand? She nodded weakly. He turned to me. Donna, guardianship petitions rely on one thing above all: documentation. And he has forged or manipulated some. We need to flood the court with real ones. So we did. We collected every prescription bottle with clearly noted dates, every grocery receipt, every church volunteer card, every appointment card, every medical bill with my consistent signature, every note I'd handwritten with absolute lucidity, even a crossword puzzle I'd completed in ink. Patrick scanned everything, labeling each page meticulously. Judges respect order, he said. We'll give them more order than they know what to do with. By afternoon, we were ready. Patrick filed a counter motion. Objection to guardianship. Due to evidence of fraud, coercion, and financial exploitation. He also filed for an emergency hearing regarding the fraudulent loan. Melissa watched in silence, twisting her fingers together, staring at her bruises as if they were physical proof of her own guilt. I touched her hand gently. This isn't your fault, I whispered. She swallowed, eyes shining. Mom, I helped him, even when I didn't mean to. You survived him, I corrected. That's all. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Outside the office window, winter wind scraped across the parking lot, carrying dead leaves like whispers of things not meant to stay hidden. When we stepped outside later, a patrol car drove slowly by. Officer Lane tipped, his head toward me, watching, protecting. I felt something anchor beneath my ribs. Eric didn't know it yet, but the tide had shifted. We weren't hiding anymore. We were preparing. That night, as Melissa slept, I sat alone at the dining table with the blue folder open and a cup of cold coffee untouched beside me. I looked at the loan contract, the signatures, the photocopied urgent care note. Pieces of a story he'd tried to write about me, a story where I was helpless, forgetful, incompetent. I smoothed my hand across the papers and whispered into the quiet room. You picked the wrong woman. The courthouse smelled like old wood and chilled air, the kind that settles into your bones whether you want it to or not. Melissa walked beside me slowly, her bruises partially hidden under a scarf. She looked fragile, but there was a steadiness in her steps. Patrick carried the blue folder under his arm like a shield. Eric was already there. Of course he was. Standing by the double doors with his lawyer, a slick man in a grey suit who looked like he practiced smirking for sport. Eric smiled when he saw us, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who thought he was about to win. He approached with outward concern. Ma, you look tired. Mel, sweetheart, you should be home resting. We didn't need to do all this. Melissa flinched. He noticed, and he smiled harder. I felt my jaw tighten. Stay away from her, I said quietly. His lawyer stepped forward. Let's keep things civil. My client is simply seeking a responsible and compassionate solution to Mrs. Carver's declining condition. Patrick let out a sharp laugh. Declining condition? She caught your client forging her signature and stealing her home. That's not decline. That's clarity. The lawyer's smirk flickered. The bailiff opened the doors. Case 27. Guardianship petition for Donna Carver. We filed in. The room was full. Neighbours, churchwomen, even the cashier from the pharmacy. People who had whispered about me in grocery aisles. People who had shaken their heads at Melissa's marital issues. People who had believed Eric's version first. Shame and anger twisted together in my chest. But we walked to the front row anyway. Judge Ellery entered, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a neat knot. She scanned the courtroom with a gaze that missed nothing. "Let's begin," she said. Eric's lawyer went first. He painted a picture with practiced smoothness, an aging widow suddenly confused by paperwork, a gentle son-in-law stepping in to help, a daughter overwhelmed and emotionally unstable, financial mismanagement, poor decision-making, a loan taken out by mistake and regretted later, a concerned family trying to prevent elder abuse. When he mentioned elder abuse, he looked directly at me and smiled. Every lie landed in the room like ash. When he finished, Judge Ellery turned to Patrick. "Your response." Patrick stood, buttoned his suit coat, and began slowly, too slowly for Eric's liking. "At first glance," he said, "Mr. Vaughn seems very concerned, very organized, very helpful." He let the word hang. But helpful people don't forge loan documents. Helpful people don't coach doctors to write false statements. And helpful people don't leave their wives bleeding on porches at 1 a.m. A murmur swept the room. Eric stiffened. Patrick opened the blue folder like he was opening scripture. "Your Honor, we'll begin with Exhibit A." Ruth's doorbell video appeared on the courtroom screen. There was Melissa, stumbling, bruised, crying. Eric's truck reversing without a glance. A hush fell over the room, so thick it felt like fabric. I watched Eric shift uncomfortably in his seat. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Judge Ellery's eyebrow lifted. "Continue?" she said. Next came the medical records, the CT scans, the photos Marisol took, the urgent care note with the suspiciously checked confusion box. Then Patrick brought out copies of my past signatures, side by side with the forged ones. Even from the back row, the differences were obvious. An audible gasp rose from the gallery. Eric swallowed. Hard. Patrick paced slowly. "Your Honor, when someone wants guardianship over a competent adult, there's usually a motive. In this case, it's quite simple." He held up the fraudulent loan document. $120,000 of sudden, unexplained credit tied to Mrs. Carver's home. Judge Ellery frowned. "When questioned," Patrick continued, "Mr. Vaughn told bank staff that Mrs. Carver was confused, forgetful, vulnerable. He began building a paper trail long before this hearing, a trail meant to make her look incompetent." He paused. "Except she isn't." He motioned to me. "Mrs. Carver, please take the stand." My heart hammered, but I stood. I walked to the witness seat with my spine straight. Judge Ellery nodded. "State your name." "Donna Louise Carver." "And your purpose for being here today?" "To stop a man who tried to take my daughter's safety, my home, and my name." Not a breath moved in the room. Patrick approached gently. "Mrs. Carver, do you manage your own finances?" "Yes." "Do you recall signing a home equity line of credit?" "No." "Do you recall anyone telling medical staff you were confused?" "No. I recall being interrupted when I tried to answer for myself." "And do you believe Mr. Vaughn has attempted to control or misrepresent your mental state?" "Yes, repeatedly." Patrick stepped back. The judge turned to Eric. "Mr. Vaughn, do you wish to cross-examine?" He stood, straightened his shirt, and sauntered forward. A mask, a performance. "Ma," he said sweetly, "you've been overwhelmed lately. I've only ever tried to help." My jaw clenched. "You are not my son, and I am not overwhelmed." Gasps rippled across the room. Eric's expression cracked, just a second, but enough to see the temper underneath. His lawyer cut in quickly. "No further questions." Patrick wasn't finished. "Next witness, Melissa Vaughn." Melissa hesitated when her name echoed in the courtroom, but she stood. She walked slowly, the bruises beneath her makeup visible from the first row. When she sat, she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Patrick asked gently, "Melissa, can you describe your husband's behavior over the last year?" Her voice trembled, but she spoke. "He kept everything. My phone, my money, my decisions. And he said Mum was losing it, that I needed to sign things for her, that she'd thank us later." She swallowed painfully. And when I disagreed, he hurt me. The silence was crushing. Someone in the back row sobbed quietly. Patrick's next question was sharp and intentional. "Melissa, do you believe your mother is incompetent?" She looked up. Her voice found steel. "No. My mother is the only reason I made it out alive." Eric shot to his feet. "She's lying." Judge Ellery slammed her gavel. "Sit down or be removed." He sat, barely. Patrick called his last witness, a handwriting analyst from the State Investigative Unit. He testified that the loan signature was highly likely to be traced or forged, pointing out the unnatural pen pressure, hesitation marks, and inconsistencies. When he finished, Judge Ellery leaned back. Her face was unreadable, but the room knew. It knew. She shuffled papers, adjusted her glasses, and said, "This court finds insufficient evidence of incompetence. The guardianship petition is hereby denied." Eric exhaled shakily, but she wasn't done. "Furthermore," she said, voice hardening, "based on testimony and submitted exhibits, this court is issuing an immediate protective order for both Donna and Melissa Carver." A murmur of disbelief swept through the gallery. Eric looked stunned. Judge Ellery continued, "In addition, the home equity line of credit will be frozen pending a criminal investigation into potential forgery and financial exploitation." Eric's face flushed dark red. "And finally," the judge added, "given the evidence of injury and coercion, this case is referred to the district attorney's office for review." Melissa gripped my hand. The room erupted in whispers. Eric lunged to his feet. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." The bailiff grabbed his arm and forced him back. Judge Ellery banged her gavel once. "Remove him from the courtroom." They dragged him out as he twisted and cursed under his breath. When the doors slammed shut behind him, the room let out a collective breath. I felt Melissa lean against me, trembling with something that felt like relief, disbelief, and grief all at once. I wrapped my arm around her. Patrick whispered, "You won." But I didn't feel victorious. I just felt like we could breathe again. As we walked out of the courtroom, the sunlight hit Melissa's face, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something return to her expression. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility, something opening, something healing. And as we stepped onto the courthouse steps, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had tried to take my mind, my house, my future. But the only thing he lost was everything he thought he controlled. The house felt different when we walked back in that afternoon. Not safer, not lighter, just honest. There were no more secrets hiding in the corners. No more lies waiting to be opened in the mailbox. No more fear woven into the quiet between footsteps. Melissa stood in the living room doorway for a long time, as if unsure whether she was allowed to breathe freely in her own childhood home. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, just from habit. Survival leaves fingerprints even after the hands are gone. I made us tea. The normal kind. No whispered instructions, no tension in the air. Just 2 cups on the table, the steam rising in soft curls like small blessings. Melissa took hers with both hands, holding it near her chest like it was something fragile. "Mum," she said softly, "did you ever think it would come to this?" I shook my head. No, but I should have known something was shifting. Abusers don't start with bruises, they start with suggestions. She nodded slowly. Eric always made everything sound reasonable, helpful, like he was thinking ahead for everyone. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not the first woman he manipulated. You won't be the last. But you are the first one who walked away and lived to tell the truth." Her lips trembled. She blinked quickly, trying to swallow the emotion rising in her throat. Breaking free is quiet before it becomes loud. The days after the hearing passed strangely, fast and slow at once. We bought groceries. We folded laundry. We returned to the bare routines of ordinary life, things Eric had stretched thin with his shadow. At night, Melissa woke up from nightmares, sometimes calling out his name in fear. I went to her room and sat on the edge of the bed until her breathing slowed again. She'd apologize each time, but I always said the same thing. You don't apologize for having survived. One afternoon, Officer Lane knocked on the door with news. Eric had been served the formal protective order. He was furious, but contained. He had also been charged with forgery and financial exploitation, while domestic violence charges were still under review. I thanked Lane and offered him a slice of leftover pie. He declined, but smiled. Before he left, he said quietly, "Ma'am, you were dispatched for years. I learned half my job because of your training. If you ever need anything, you call me directly." I didn't expect the tears that welled up. Respect feels different when you think the world has forgotten your name. Melissa started therapy with a counselor Patrick recommended, a woman in her 40s who spoke softly but with steel under her words. After each session, Melissa came home quieter, but clearer. She baked again. She rearranged the closet. She hummed sometimes while washing dishes. Little signs of life returning, shy and tender. Healing is not a moment. It is a permission slip you sign every morning, even when your hand shakes. Neighbors changed too. Some kept their distance, embarrassed by the rumors they had believed. Some approached shyly, offering pies, prayers, or quiet apologies. Ruth came over every Sunday like clockwork, bringing muffins and fierce loyalty in equal measure. One afternoon, she sat in my kitchen and said, "Donna, he really thought he'd outsmart you. Imagine that." I laughed for the first time in weeks, a real laugh, the kind that climbs out of your chest like a bird relearning its wings. The fraud department of the bank eventually called. The loan was cancelled. The forged paperwork was removed. A formal investigation was opened into the employee who submitted it without verification. When I hung up the phone, I stood in the kitchen and let out a breath I'd been holding for 6 weeks. Melissa walked in a moment later and saw the look on my face. "Mum." "It's over," I said. "The house is safe." She burst into tears, the kind that break open from relief, not pain. One evening, while we folded laundry, she said something that made my heart ache in a different way. "Mum, I don't know who I am without him." I put down the towel and turned to her. "You're who you were before he tried to rewrite you, and who you are is coming back, bit by bit." She pressed her lips together, nodding. Then, for the first time since that night on my porch, she leaned into me, not as a frightened daughter clinging to safety, but as a woman choosing to be held while she rebuilt herself. A month later, she moved into a small apartment across town. Bright windows, quiet neighbors, a lock she controlled, a place that didn't remember the sound of his anger. She cried the day she got the keys. but she walked inside alone. She insisted that was her victory. As for me, I went back to my routines: church, grocery store on Wednesdays, coffee on the porch, with Ruth arguing about the weather forecast. Life, ordinary and miraculous. People began stopping me in the aisles again, but this time not to whisper, to say, "We heard what happened, and we're glad you fought." And each time, I'd nod, not smiling, not bragging, just acknowledging the truth. Women like me fight quietly because we spent a lifetime learning how. And sometimes, when Melissa visits, I catch her looking at me with a mix of love and disbelief, like she finally sees something she grew up with but never named. Strength doesn't retire. It just changes uniforms. Now and then, I think about the forged signature, the pen strokes he shaped to look like mine, the lie he tried to bury in paperwork. But the truth is stronger than ink, because ink can be forged. But a woman's clarity, earned over decades, cannot. You see, people imagine villains arriving with thunder, but most arrive with charm, most arrive with smiles, most arrive with paperwork, and they hope you won't read closely. But I did. And I learned something I want you to remember too. Something every woman over 60 should keep tucked inside her heart. The world may underestimate us, but it cannot erase us. Not when we choose to remain the authors of our own lives. Because truth doesn't disappear when someone tries to bury it. It waits. Quietly. Patiently. Firmly. And sometimes all it takes is one woman willing to read the fine print.